Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for the Center Square. Joining me today is the Center Square's Wisconsin correspondent, Benjamin Yount. Ben, let's just jump into it today. The Supreme Court race in Wisconsin, you have written, is very closely watched nationally.
I believe you mean the most watched Supreme Court race in the entire country, perhaps the election to watch this spring in the entire country. Yeah. Wisconsin is, unsurprisingly, once again at the center of the national political universe. And let's be clear as to why Wisconsin gets the attention that it does. This is as purple a state as you can find. Maybe 51-49, maybe 49-49. A lot of it depends on turnout, but Wisconsin decides presidential elections. Wisconsin is part of the broader blue wall in the Midwest for Democrats. There are an awful lot of people, perhaps even more people politically, watching Wisconsin from outside of the state than they are watching inside the state. And this race is it. If you turn on the television, if you turn on the radio, if you go to watch YouTube videos, you want to watch a guy make croque monsieur on YouTube, you're going to get two ads about Wisconsin's Supreme Court race. And the first headline of this week for the race is that we had the primary on Tuesday, and we now know who the two candidates are. Unsurprisingly, the liberal candidate, Janet Protasiewicz, easily won. She got more votes than the two conservative candidates combined. Perhaps a little surprising is that the judge from the Waukesha Christmas Parade Massacre trial, Jennifer Dorow, she fell short. Former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Dan Kelly won, and so now we have this standoff between a former staunchly conservative Supreme Court justice in Dan Kelly and a would like to be justice, very liberal, proudly proclaims her progressive title, Janet Protasiewicz, and we are off to the races, a sprint towards April 4th and the general election.
Okay, but why is this so compelling nationwide?
The Wisconsin Supreme Court will decide the abortion question. Not for the nation, but will decide the abortion question here in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's one of 20-something states where after Dobbs, after the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court struck down Roe, that we went back to the old law. And Wisconsin's law is from 1849 and practically bans all abortions. Folks on the left have seen this as an opportunity to overturn that. They can't do it through the legislature. They don't have the votes. Wisconsin doesn't have a statewide binding referendum process. So the only way to change the abortion law here in Wisconsin is to use the Supreme Court. But it goes beyond that. There's concern that a liberal court, a progressive court here in Wisconsin, and whoever wins this race swings the court to either a conservative or a progressive majority. There is genuine concern that a progressive court here in Wisconsin would undo a decade's worth of Republican reforms that came in with the Scott Walker era. And for those who remember back a decade ago, that includes Act 10 and Right to Work and many of the budget reforms, the spending reforms that have given Wisconsin a $7 billion budget surplus. So it is mainly the abortion question. That's why people are paying such attention to this race. But here in Wisconsin, there is real concern that if Janet Protasiewicz is elected, the Walker era reforms that Republicans say saved this state will be erased without a single vote.
Correct my pronunciation on this if I get it incorrect. Didn't Janet Protasiewicz come under fire for some rather controversial comments that she made prior to the primary election?
Yeah, she's all but guaranteed that she will be a vote for progressives. And this is the rules for judges. And it doesn't matter if you're a trial court judge or you're running for the Supreme Court. You're not supposed to say how you're going to rule in cases that may come before you. Trial court judges aren't supposed to say, well, I'm a big supporter of the death penalty and I'll hang him from the tallest tree. And Dan Kelly, the conservative, has made a lot of hay. And he's not incorrect in the argument that Janet Protasiewicz is essentially saying, if you vote for me, I will be your vote on the court for abortion, gay rights, same-sex marriage, environmental issues. And so this is an issue. There was not a long while back, there was a complaint filed with the state's Judicial Ethics Board to say you're not supposed to do this. And they want, of course, a ruling that would say Protasiewicz must recuse herself from these cases before they come before the high court. Now, if you ask her, and when she is asked, Protasiewicz says she's simply stating her values. She's not telling you how she's going to rule on a specific case because she hasn't seen the case yet, but she is simply stating her values in the same way that Dan Kelly says his value is to uphold the Constitution and follow the rule of law. His campaign slogan, the tagline that they use, and you see this in almost every interview they do, is that he will follow the rule of law. She will follow the rule of Janet. And if you look on Twitter in Wisconsin this week, you cannot escape that line.
Well, it sort of kind of reminds me of when Supreme Court Justice John Roberts was being questioned before being approved for the U.S. Supreme Court. And they asked him what his perspective of what his job would be. And he said, calling balls and strikes. It sounds like Protasiewicz would be more prone to being an umpire if she could rescind the infield fly rule.
There was a candidate forum where she was asked about her values. And she said, in most cases, there would be no thumb on the scale. And again, you have to do the sort of addition by subtraction. If she says, in most cases, there wouldn't be a thumb on the scale, Dan Kelly, and I think we had this in the story that we filed on Wednesday morning, just after the election, Dan Kelly said, look, if she's saying that in most cases there won't be a thumb, it means in some cases there will be a thumb. And judges, he argues, in every opportunity that he has, judges are not supposed to do that. And if you say you're going to put the thumb on the scale even once, you can't be trusted. As he put it, you cannot hold a position of trust within the judicial system. Now, this is not so much a race about issues, about philosophy, about left versus right, as this is going to be a race in Wisconsin about money and voter turnout. And Democrats on Tuesday and looking into April have shown that they have a big advantage, a large advantage in both.
Ben, you have such a wealth of information on this because you're our ears and feet on the ground in Wisconsin. Is there anything else or background information that you think would benefit listeners when it comes to this topic?
In the November election, Dane County saw 90% voter turnout, and about 80% of that were Democratic voters. In the primary election on Tuesday, statewide voter turnout was about 20%, a little over. But in some polling places in the city of Madison, they ran out of printed ballots. It's one of those snapshot stories where you get just a tiny look at something that tells a bigger story. And if in Madison they ran out of printed ballots in an off-year February primary where there was a huge early voting push, it is an indication of just how many people are going to turn out to vote in this election. We don't know how many, and we don't know where they're going to be. But to say that this is the most watched judicial race in the country, absolutely true. To say this is the most expensive judicial race in the country, absolutely true. To say this is the most expensive judicial race in the state of Wisconsin's history, absolutely true. To say that this is the most watched judicial race in the state of Wisconsin, absolutely true, because the stakes are so high. Both left and right are saying that there is no coming back if we lose this. So as we go forward, look for not only a flood, an avalanche, a pick your natural disaster term of commercials, but watch the voter turnout. And if Republicans can turn out their base, which is not just in the suburban WOW counties, but in outstate Wisconsin, they've got to find the votes to offset the voter turnout that is coming in Madison and Dane County, because that's where Tony Evers won as governor. That's where Janet Protasiewicz got a ton of her votes in the primary, and that's where this election is going to be decided. If you want to take a look and see where you need to gauge voter turnout, it's always Dane County.
Well, thanks a lot, Ben. Listeners can keep up with the story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Benjamin Yount and Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for the Center Square, please subscribe, and thank you for listening.